got the cash in the bag, stadium packed. Born a rock star in this life, gon' live it up on the attack. Baby, I'm bad, I just wanna get caught up in this life. I'm crazy, I'm mad, doing no cap. Only got one, you better go live it up. Cash in the bag, stadium packed. Baby, I'm bad, baby, I'm bad.
I just wanna stay bad, stay mad. Chip on my shoulder cause they treat me like an outcast. I ain't gonna take that, stay back. I'll be swinging hard till the hits come in all caps. I ain't gonna lay back, pray that someone's gonna help me. Ain't nobody like that. I ain't gonna wait, that's all facts. Only one shot and I'll never get the throne back. I'm sick of being cautious, I'ma go cause some pain to stop this. I'ma steal everybody's lane, call it shoplift. Everyone complain when they thoughtless. Taste the pain, it's like candy canes. It makes me go change into a better frame. And you don't care the name, society's insane. We all live for fame.
Hey, welcome back to GTM. Hopefully you didn't mind the long intro. Today I want to tell you about the Hybrid12 from Atibal. It is a 35mm tube on this. It's got exposed turrets. It's got a big old fin built into the back to switch between 1 and 12 power. Comes with scope caps. Has a side parallax. Exposed turrets that are resettable to 0 and also dialable. Has a mill reticle. Has an illuminated reticle as well. There's a lot going for this, but the reason that I did a long intro for this today, guys, is because I just needed to prove to you what I'm about to say. I have literally hundreds of dollars invested into this review, and this is normal for all the reviews that you see on my channel. I don't just put 50 rounds down the tube and call it and say it's reviewed. I understand it. I know what the optic is going to be like. I legitimately, for whatever reason, I do this to myself. I use it pretty extensively. I've used it in every time of day, sunlight and moonlight, during the peak of the day when it's really hot and bright out, and then I've used it during moonlight when it was it was 12:30 at night, using it for a night session or two. Magnification, I've used it on 1 power, I've used it on 12 power. I've shot it really fast, trying to do triplets at 50 yards, really hard on steel, timing myself. That was fun. And then going out slow fire, pretty precise shooting past 1,000 yards. I've used holdovers. I've used the holdovers out to 600 yards and just using that reticle and getting really comfortable with that second focal plane reticle at different distances and magnifications. And then dialing, I've done both. I've done a hybrid of both, of holdovers and dialing. I've shot with no wind, perfectly calm moments, and then 15-mile-an-hour winds using the full reticle and the lateral lines on the reticle. I've shot in 85-degree temperatures. I've shot in 30-degree temperatures with it when it's really cold. I shot at 15 yards. Kind of a more home defense and around the clearing the corners kind of shooting, and then 1,015 yards slow fire, precise shooting. I shot for groups, and then I've just spotted for friends and taken a look at the glass at different times of the day. And so I'm just telling you, I have legitimately hundreds of dollars in match ammo through this rifle that's not provided to me. Nobody's giving me that match ammo. I'm paying for it, and so I think I have a legitimate case for why I think this is a good optic.
That 69 grain rocks it pretty good.
All right, starting off with the ocular focus ring right here. Now this has good knurling to it. It's got a good range of travel. I was able to get the reticle sharp. I dial mine all the way to the right. Technically that's what makes it sharp for me on this particular optic. And it has lots of range of travel for different eye issues that you might have, or just the need to make that reticle crystal clear. But it also seems smooth enough that even in the winter time when everything kind of starts to change tolerances and sizes, it's still going to be able to move for me. So being from Minnesota, that kind of thing matters. If a dial is too tight or too firm, it's not going to work well in the winter. I just know that right off the bat. As metal shrinks and everything shrinks, it's not going to work in cold temperatures for me. And so moving on to the magnification lever here, there's kind of an additional throw on there which I like, especially again cold weather shooting. I'm always thinking about that. And this one moves nice and smooth, and so I think when it comes to the cold weather, I'm not going to have any issues with that. Magnification throw levers or assists are becoming more and more popular in the aftermarket. I kind of like it just being built into the scope. If I'm going to be honest with you, I'd prefer it that way probably 10 times out of 10. It doesn't run into issues on guns that I have. It doesn't stop me from running the function or the action at all. It doesn't run down into the rail or scope rings. It's built right, it's the right size, and it has a good aggressive texture on it so I can get a good hold of it even if I'm wearing gloves. And so kudos to Atibal for thinking ahead and making it a part of the actual design of the scope. I think that was a good decision. Moving on to parallax. Now this is really cool. You can shoot as close as 10 yards functionally with that parallax. And so if you were trying to look clearly across a room or something really close like that, or maybe you were just trying to set up a plumb bob inside to get your reticle focused and then also level, which is a really important thing. If you're going to shoot a scope long range, you need a parallax that can do something like that. And so I think that's really cool to be able to run a plumb bob at 10 yards inside before I ever get to the range and make sure the thing is level and the rifle's level. It's really cool. Obviously, it has different incremental values on there, and it goes up to infinity, but it's different for each eye. I found the reticle focus, or the parallax, rather, knob to be smooth, be functional, and very, very cool to have on a 1-12 like this. I thought, at about 10 power or greater, that's when I want to have a parallax knob most of the time, and I definitely could tell the difference, and it made a difference significantly in my impacts downrange because I wasn't inducing parallax air nearly as often, and my group sizes, which I'll show you later, were respectable, I thought. I do like the way that the illumination knob itself is set up. It is distinguishably different than the parallax knob, and it sticks out just a little bit further. I don't think it's going to catch on things or dig into your back if you sling your rifle. It just sticks out enough that I can actually get a hold of it if I'm wearing gloves. It does have 0 as an offsetting in between, which if you're going to do illumination, do it right. Make it bright enough, and then also have off as a setting so that you can quickly get to things in the middle of the night. If you don't want to try to filter through the right settings, you could just kind of leave it on a 0 in between 2 numbers that you think you'll probably use. And so I like having off as a setting there. It runs on the proper batteries, that we're all using already. And on top of that, I would say that the tactileness, the clicks of it, it's pretty intentional. You're going to be firm in moving it in those directions. And 1 through 6 is a good range for the lowest, like night vision setting, and then 6, the brightest you'll probably end up using on any given day. I just thought I'd take a minute real briefly to tell you about the reticle in the most clear form that I can, and also touching on illumination. So illumination is going to be this center part right here, up and down the stadia here, and not the grid pattern off to the side, the windage holds, which is totally fine by me. I think this makes a lot of sense, especially on a second focal plane. No reason to illuminate all of this. If it was a first focal plane, maybe that would make more sense, but with this, not so much. I think a second focal plane, especially these angled pieces right here, this is really useful, and that center dot, of course. This is just something that your eye will be able to pick up on, and it's the most likely thing you're going to use if you're illuminating the reticle. And so just talking about some of the values here real briefly. So this dot right here, this is an important thing to talk about. This is a 1/4 mil size dot. And so it's a little bit bigger than maybe some other like precision dots out there. And that's a good thing, guys. Again, it's a second focal plane, and you're going to be using it for shooting probably a little bit bigger targets from time to time. You're not shooting tiny little bug hole groups. You're shooting a little bit bigger targets. Although that being said, at 300 yards, this dot did not cover up. Actually, it was 325 yards. This dot did not cover up my clay pigeon. I could still see my clay pigeon inside of that, and so it was plenty enough. But I know that, like, if deer hunting comes and deer are coming down the trail, I'm going to be able to pick up this dot, especially if I throw on illumination against that brown. And these right here are going to help guide me in. I'm going to be able to see exactly where I'm at, kind of make this little kill donut right here. Anything that's inside there is pretty much dead at 100 yards. And so this right here is a nice precision dot, and then just quicker shots. I know anything in here is good to go. And this just helps my eye, especially if it's illuminated. This helps my eye pick it up and tell kind of where I'm at on a grid pattern here, if I'm high or low. And so I think the illumination makes a lot of sense. That was a good decision. And the center dot size, which is really important to me, that makes a lot of sense. And it was not holding me back at all, even though it is a 1/4 mil size dot. So when you have your reticle, if you're trying to judge things, something really important that I think is worth me taking a minute to talk about is the lateral line here. When you're dialing, and I do dial for things, believe it or not, the scope has 86 mils advertised of internal elevation. You're never going to use that much in your whole life. It just won't work, but it apparently has 86 mils, which is incredible. When you dial out to different distances, like I dialed a little over 18 mils at over, let's see, it was 1,030 yards. I needed these lines. It was very windy that day. Unfortunately, a couple times that I shot at 1,000 yards plus, it was very windy. I was trying to get out there on a really calm night, and I was actually glad when I thought about it later that I was not out there on a calm night, because I got to use these lateral lines, and these were very useful. So the horizontal lines here are staggered at, you can see the numbers are right here. You're going to have a reticle guide like this inside of your scope package as well, but they go from 1/4 mil to 1/2 mil, and then 1/4 mil, 1/2 mil, back and forth. And so you can actually kind of use that for gauging if you're a little high, a little low when you're using windage holds. And guys, most of the time, if you're shooting at long range, you're going to get spin drift. You're definitely going to get some wind on most reasonable days. You're still going to have wind to deal with. You're not going to be just holding on the center dot most of the time unless you dial for windage as well. I tend not to dial for windage. A lot of people don't. And so I ended up using these very often. In fact, I started using way out here, and the different heights was nice to be able to differentiate between which one I was holding and get a really precise hold. And even knowing that, okay, here's a 1/4 mil, here's a 1/2 mil height, that helped me get my dialing very, very exact, and the tracking was good and true with the dialing of those turrets, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But the reticle itself is functional. It has probably the right amount of information and doesn't get overwhelming. There's not just such a huge amount of information that it's just complex. Most of the numbers you're looking at here on this grid make a whole lot of sense. I don't think it's important, to know like this is 0.125 mil thick. Yeah, you're probably not going to use that stat very often, but knowing, hey, this is a mil by a mil, there's something that's actually useful. Knowing perhaps that this is a 1/4 mil center dot. Yeah, you can actually kind of use that for a little bit of ranging and milling if you know what you're doing, especially with equations. It does go down 10 mils. It goes up 5 mils. It goes to the left and the right 5 mils. And you're going to have on the extreme wind holds, you do have some pluses here, and you may or may not use that. But when you start getting out to just holdovers, which I also was doing, 10 mils of holdover is not hard to get to with a 223. 700 yards, you're going to start getting down in here. 700 yards, you're going to be down here somewhere with most 223 loads. And yeah, you actually, on a windy day, you do get out here. And so having another place to hold that is nice, and it kind of separates the staggered dots here. Kind of gives you a little bit of a barrier or an end of reticle. And so it's all about studying your reticle, knowing it, and that's really going to be on you guys. But I'm just going to tell you, this one is so simple, it's easy to use, and I think even probably a novice would very quickly understand these numbers and remember them, which is the important thing, guys. They're very standard numbers, and they're easy to just lock in and look at that reticle in its second focal plane, so you're on 12 power when you're using it, and that's when these values add up. That's what it's calibrated for, and it's going to make a lot of sense. And so kudos on the reticle. Very happy with that. Was not hard for me to make hits at over 1,000 yards, other than just being really windy. Okay, real quickly, I'm just going to go through this because I think some people will find it useful. It is a second focal plane. It does have locking turrets, but they're not. It's not a zero stop underneath that. Has 6 brightness settings. The glass is a Hoya Japanese ED glass, and so this is good glass, guys. It definitely is good. It stands out above the competition, and that's going to increase the price a little bit. But again, when you start getting into quality ED glass, especially Japanese glass, it makes the shooting experience different, and that's why it's so worth it, and that's why so many companies are going to it, is the end users can tell the difference. It's a mil reticle with mil turrets. That's really important. I'm just going to move on down. These are things you've seen: fog-proof, waterproof, shock-proof. Yep, definitely need that. Lifetime warranty. Okay, that's important. So lifetime warranty is something that I kind of need to see on an optic nowadays. I need to know that I'm going to be taken care of, especially if I'm spending good money on a product that, I don't know, if you're on a hunt and it gets dropped, accidents happen, things fall off the truck, you let your buddy use the scope and he didn't mount the optic correctly, and maybe he breaks something. You just don't know what's going to happen. It's just nice to see this, and I kind of need to see that nowadays. Another important feature here, I'm not going to talk about a lot in the review, but it does make a big difference. The objective lens diameter is 32 millimeters. That's great. Eye relief is 3.5 to 6 inches. I tested this, by the way. And yes, this optic literally can go out to 6 inches of eye relief very comfortably. I marked it on my stock because I couldn't believe it. I thought maybe something was wrong, and you know what? It does really truly have 6 inches. I was at about 3.5 inches on 12 power. Pretty comfortable though, and a nice eye box, especially considering it's a 12 power, guys. Really not bad at all. 3.5 to 6 inches. That's an accurate figure. Another thing people care about, field of view. You want to know how much field of view am I going to have with that 12 power. So at 100 yards, you have 110 feet, and that's right in there. I would say that's very respectable. Right around 110 feet, 115 feet, something like that is very respectable. The adjustment clicks, if you're going to use those exposed turrets and you're going to click on them, it's 1/10 mil. And then again, 86 mils of internal elevation. That is just nuts. A lot of people care about weight nowadays. 24.8 ounces. Remember, that's ED Japanese glass. These are not cheap glass lenses. You know, they're actually high quality. So you're coming in at 24.8. And then the length is 11.25 inches, which is crazy because I've had 1 to 8 powers that were longer than this. And nowadays we're seeing a 1 to 12 with a side parallax 35 millimeter tube, and it's only 11.25 inches. Very, very cool. And of course it is made from 61 T6 aircraft grade aluminum. I would expect nothing less, but it's good to know that it's made with good parts, and these specs are looking very, very good. So I want you to consider that and listen to what I have to say about this. Resetting the turrets is pretty easy. There's no zero stop to have to mess with. You know, just use a coin or something like that. That's what I use there. Take it out, and you're going to slip it around, slip the scales. You can see the brass housing inside there, and you're going to put it down on the number 0. Line it up with the witness mark, which is on the tube there, which the tube has identifying markers for which is the right direction, as well as the scope cap there. It'll tell you which way is the right way to dial for up or down. It's just nice to have some stupid proof things like that, and so you're not going to get confused. Then when I got on the 0, just test it out a little bit, make sure everything's functioning well, and it was. Going over to the windage, it's the same process. It's not complicated, guys. If you've never done it before, it's really hard to get it wrong. These turrets do not have a zero stop, but they are lift to operate, and they're kind of like the smooth, clicky kind. They're not tactile, like crunchy. They're more smooth and clicky, and they worked well for me. Tracked true. I didn't see any issues with my data for anything, and I would have figured it out with the distances I was shooting.
Oh, that's it. You hit it. There it is. Ah, here's another hit.
Here's a group I shot with 77 grain Federal. Those were gold medal, and I was pretty happy with that 4-shot group right there. I actually repeated that a couple times, and that's about a 1 MOA size group at 900 yards. Shooting it at 325 yards, just pretty easy, and the reticle handles the closer shooting just as well as the further shooting, in my opinion.
That's kind of why I don't shoot it at 300 yards a lot. It is pretty easy at 300 yards. This reticle can do a lot more than 300 yards, but at least you know at closer distances like 300 yards, very usable. Reticle center dot is good to go for sure. Maybe I'll shoot some clays here for a little bit and test it out on something a little smaller. That's clay pigeon first round. You know, the first round I shot at a clay pigeon, immediate impact. I'm only shooting at 325 yards, but 325 yards on a target that's, you know, clay pigeon size. And the dot itself takes up just about the core of the pigeon. You see a little orange around the outside.
So I didn't only shoot this gun at, you know, long range or longer range for 5.56. I did shoot it closer, like 100 yards or 25 yards or 15 yards. I didn't just shoot from bench. I didn't just shoot from the prone. I ran a little bit of a course here and there. I did some run and gun stuff with it. I was shooting, this was just at 220 yards or 219 yards technically. And I just tried everything that I could think of that practically somebody with this optic would want to see their rifle do. And I think ideally a lot of guys would probably throw this more on a 308 AR-10 something to that effect. In fact, if I had an AR-10, I think this optic would be on it instead. I like my 20-inch quite a bit, and that's why it's on there right now, as I can do a lot with it, and I find it to shoot pretty well, so kudos to PSA for putting out a rifle that can shoot well. But most of the time, I see guys with an AR-10 putting something like this on there. It's like the ultimate DMR type optic. And then if you're going to shoot some groups, or you're going to shoot steel, or you're going to hunt, you know, a 308 AR-10 or a 6.5 AR-10 or a 6.5 Grendel AR, I could just see so much versatility with those rounds and a lot of things that you want to do. And it becomes the do-all rifle that you really want an AR to be at the end of the day. You know, something that's magazine fed and reliable and quick to shoot and has a pretty reasonable trigger. And so I see this optic matching up really well on those platforms. You could get creative and throw it on other things, but from my experience, I kind of think that it's a great auto gun matchup. I think the price point is going to make this pretty much within reach of most people out there, and especially as we're seeing people make their ARs more and more capable, and we're seeing mid-power variable optics going on. Even this 223 or 5.56 gun that I was taking past 1,000 yards, you know, we're seeing people do more and more and make more and more out of their rifles. And I think this optic complements a lot of rifles because it has that side parallax, it has illumination, it's a 35mm tube. It's just a very, very capable optic, and I think it adds a lot to whatever platform you put it on. And there's nothing about it that really makes me feel like it's held back from doing some of the more technical things, really fast, close shooting, or really far, long-range, precise shooting. I just don't feel like it holds me back from either. It's pretty cool, so good job to Atibal on the Hybrid 12. I've really enjoyed it, and it's very, very unique. I think this fills a niche in the market, and man, I'm behind this mid-power variable optic trend.